God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? The whole world wants peace, and the whole world prepares for war. Mankind is powerless against mankind, and the gods, as ever, show it the ways of fate. All ages before us have believed in gods in some form or other. Only an unparalleled impoverishment of symbolism could enable us to rediscover the gods as psychic factors, that is, as archetypes of the unconscious. Since the stars have fallen from heaven and our highest symbols have paled, a secret life holds sway in the unconscious. That is why we have psychology today, and why we speak of the unconscious. All this would be quite superfluous in an age or culture that possessed symbols. Our unconscious, on the other hand, hides living water, spirit that has become nature, and that is why it is disturbed. Heaven has become for us the cosmic space of the physicists, and the divine empyrean a fair memory of things that once were. But the heart glows, and a secret unrest gnaws at the roots of our being. In the words of the Voluspa, we may ask, what murmurs Wotan over Mimir's head? Already the spring boils. These writings by Nietzsche and Jung summarize a most profound problem taking root in the soul of Western man, that is, increasingly widespread mental illness born from the psychological and spiritual emptiness left in the absence of religion and spirituality. What was once revered as primordial stories of Earth's nature is now seen as illogical superstition and nothing more. This is, however, a monumental mistake. Man is not his consciousness alone. Rather, he is an arrangement of psychological structures far beyond conscious understanding. And it is these structures that were once contained and guided through religious practice. As such, an assault on religion from the basis of rationality and science betrays a deadly naivety in man and opens up his psyche to a great disturbance. In the words of Jung, whether you believe in a demon of the air or in a factor in the unconscious that plays diabolical tricks on you is all one to me. The fact that man's imagined unity is menaced by alien powers remains the same in either case. Theologians would do better to take account, for once, of these psychological facts than to go on demythologizing them with rationalistic explanations that are 100 years behind the times. I put it to the enlightened rationalist, has his rational reduction led to the beneficial control of matter and spirit? He will point proudly to the advances in physics and medicine, to the freeing of the mind from medieval stupidity. But we continue to ask, what have all our other cultural achievements led to? The fearful answer is there before our eyes. Man has been delivered from no fear. A hideous nightmare lies upon the world. So far, reason has failed lamentably, and the very thing that everybody wanted to avoid rolls on in ghastly progression. Let us have wars for which somebody else is always to blame, nobody seeing that all the world is driven to do just what all the world flees from in terror. Throughout the entirety of man's great history, religious entities were considered as fundamental to reality. Thus, man held a means by which he could project his internal experience onto the world around him, and thereby live in harmony with himself. However, we find ourselves in the modern age thoroughly deprived of such symbolism. We must ask ourselves whether the myths of the past were truly nothing more than base superstition. We must ask, for what purpose did early man hold such convictions? Was it not due to man's nature itself being rooted in spirit? or to use terminology more palpable to our limited modern dialect, was it not due to the psychology of man being dependent upon external symbols? Thus, when we ruthlessly cut away at the so-called superstitions of the past with an axe called rationality, do we not assault just exactly our very humanity in the process? Man conquers not only nature, but spirit also, without realizing what he is doing. This is not to denigrate the vital importance of the conscious will, which is what allows us to reach the freedom we currently enjoy. However, man awoke from a great sea of the unconscious, and his conscious will is still young and is yet in danger of naivety. We must take the utmost care not to destroy the very roots that give our psyche and our conscious will its essential vitality. The further we stray from our subconscious roots and become ever more beings of an uprooted intellect, the more we will experience every manner of psychopathology and mental illness. We will, so to speak, sever the arteries providing lifeblood to our conscious will. In the words of Jung, progress and development are ideals not lightly to be rejected, but they lose all meaning if man only arrives at his new state as a fragment of himself, having left his essential hinterland behind him in the shadow of the unconscious, in a state of primitivity, or indeed barbarism. The conscious mind, split off from its origins, incapable of realizing the meaning of the new state, then relapses all too easily into a situation far worse than the one from which the innovation was intended to free it. If then the childhood state of the collective psyche is repressed to the point of total exclusion, the unconscious content overwhelms the conscious aim and inhibits, falsifies, even destroys its realization. Viable progress only comes from the cooperation of both. In this way, without the joint cooperation of the ego and the deep subconscious, man, despite his best efforts, will relapse into a state of primitivity and barbarism. Is this not blatantly evident in our modern society? Our morality, sexuality, identity, and so forth is now staring straight into an abyss. Man can find no scientific justification for kindness, for faithfulness, or for meaning. It is the soul and heart that sustains man's existence, not his mind. Regardless, we march ever onwards, continually assaulting that very foundation of our own psychological function. But this process is bound to end in utter catastrophe. In the words of Jung, in reality, we can never legitimately cut loose from our archetypal foundations unless we are prepared to pay the price of a neurosis, any more than we can rid ourselves of our body and its organs without committing suicide. If we cannot deny the archetypes or otherwise neutralize them, we are confronted at every new stage in the differentiation of consciousness to which civilization attains with the task of finding a new interpretation appropriate to this stage in order to connect the life of the past that still exists in us with the life of the present. Thus, the modern man is confronted with a task of absolute importance. He must construct for himself a new means of reconnecting to his archetypal, subconscious nature. He must venture down to the dark, watery nature of his subconscious roots, so as to rediscover what it means to live as a man. This descent into the depths of the human subconscious is something that must be taken before any attempt to climb higher is made. What is the point of technology that enables us to fly to the moon if we are only to devolve into civil war? What use is the most magnificent understanding of physics, biology, chemistry, and engineering today if we are to launch nuclear warheads at each other tomorrow? With his terrifying arsenal of destructive technology, man can no longer afford such mistakes. The longer we pretend that we are in perfect control of ourselves, the more we will pile up a gigantic Promethean debt that will have to be paid off in the form of hideous catastrophes. In our hubris, we will repeat the myth of Icarus as we fly ever higher to the sun with little more than wax holding together our wings. Or, if we are humble and wise, we will take off our wings, admit its insufficiency, and build it with materials that can indeed withstand the might of the sun. Then we will soar higher than even the sun itself, towards that distant star that Nietzsche proclaimed as the Superman. However, this choice is hanging delicately in the balance, and man dances upon a minefield. In the words of Jung and Nietszche, man is a rope stretched between the animal and the Superman, a rope over an abyss. It seems to me, frankly, that former ages did not exaggerate, that the spirit has not sloughed off its demonisms, and that mankind, because of its scientific and technological development, has in increasing measure delivered itself over to the danger of possession. When shall we stop taking man for granted in this barbarous manner, and in all seriousness seek ways and means to exorcise him, to rescue him from possession and unconsciousness, and make this most vital task of civilization? Can we not understand that all the outward tinkerings and improvements do not touch man's inner nature, and that everything ultimately depends upon whether the man who wields the science and techniques is capable of responsibility or not? Christianity has shown us the way, but, as the facts bear witness, it has not penetrated deeply enough below the surface.